is episode 10 of the Retro Game Club podcast, and with me is Rob.
Hey, yeah, we made it. Double digits.
Yeah, that's when you are officially a real podcast.
And I have my mic correct this time, so that's another official thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to have a few bad audio recording episodes along the way. But we got a lot this week. We're gonna talk a little bit about importing Famicom games and a whole bunch of Nintendo news, a bunch of Nintendo 64 news.
Yeah, and I had a lot going on this past week. I don't know if I mentioned it. I think early on in the podcast, but there is and you can find them on Facebook. I'm sure they have a regular website too. Project Pinball Charity. If you just Facebook search that, you'll find them instantly. It's a children's hospital pinball charity where you buy a raffle ticket for $40-ish, and you can win a pinball machine. And I won. So they are legit and real and cool. And some of the kids get something. I think their hospitals get pinball machines or something like that too. But I got a new 2019 Munsters pinball machine delivered to me this week, and haven't got a lot of work done because of that. It's great. It's really cool. If you live near a barcade that has one, I definitely recommend checking it out. I ended up playing with my Sky 3DS a lot this week too. That's the 3DS homebrew cart. And then I modded my Vita, which we'll get on a show because I'm going to be kind of doing a lot of road trips this summer and want a retro machine on the go. So I'm sure that'll be a topic of the episode sometime. But yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like a kind of a first world problem, but I was actually debating whether or not I need to buy a backup Vita because I have a really big back catalog of games. Mm-hmm. All stuff I want to play. It's not like just garbage games I picked up that I'm never ever going to play. And I'm just concerned, like, geez, if my main Vita ever dies, it's not like Sony's ever going to sell a Vita to PlayStation 5 adapter.
Yeah, exactly.
Which would be great. Can you imagine how awesome that? Like, I wish there was a PSP UMD player add-on for something, right? That would be a little bit trickier because you got to have a laser and all that stuff. But something where you could like put a PS Vita. Basically, the carts are so small, you could have like a USB adapter that went on the front and then play a Vita game on the upcoming PlayStation 5. So Sony, if you're listening, you can have that idea for free.
Yeah. Well, but also they have a bunch of Vita games in their shop. Well, they did. PSP games in their shop. They did till it closed. But so if you already bought those digital download versions, then you got them. But yeah, I know what you're saying. You didn't, so that doesn't help you.
Yeah, I mean, I have some digital downloads, and some of them are cross-play. Like, you can play them on PlayStation 4 or Vita. But I have a lot of physical games still. I've got a pretty good catalog that I still want to get through, mostly because they're RPGs, and they all take a long time.
Yeah,
But I'm not buying a backup Vita, I don't think, now that they've stopped producing them. I'm just going to hope somebody makes some other Vita solution. I guess I should probably start looking into, like, PSP emulators, because I still have a few PSP games in my back catalog, and
there are some good ones. There's some really good PSP emulators that work well. So, play your backups on those.
Yeah, first I got to figure out how you rip a PSP game on Linux, if that's even a thing you can do.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, when I was, you'd recommended this podcast, this interview with Rebecca Hindman.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I mispronounced her last name. Not that she's listening. Longtime programmer. But on that interview, she talked about the 3DO disk encryption. And it occurred to me that, I've never been able to rip a 3DO game because I have a decent assortment of 3DO games. And I at some point would like to get into 3DO emulation a little bit. But there's not like an obvious way to rip the games, or at least rip them where you can see like the content on the disc, like if you wanted to pull out the audio files or something like that. So that was one of the many things I learned on that interview.
Come to think of it, I've never had like a 3DO ISO, but I don't know if I've ever looked, because all or most of the games I either own on a different system like PlayStation or something, or there's a better version of them someplace else anyway. You know, like Street Fighter
Yeah.
2. It's a great version, but there's better versions, you know. So,
Yeah. Oh, Super Street Fighter 2 on 3DO. I don't know if there's a better version other than the arcade version. Maybe the Saturn. I haven't played like one of the Saturn collections or anything like that, but that's probably a port. Yeah, Super Street Fighter 2 on the 3DO is. I know we're way off topic here. That is way better than the Super Nintendo or Genesis versions. I really, truly think so. And I've played all three very extensively. The only downside is that the 3DO controller by default only has 3 buttons because of poor planning, I assume.
yeah.
So you can get a 3DO Super Nintendo controller adapter, which is like the number one must-have accessory for any 3DO owner.
Do you have a 3DO system?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a Panasonic, it's the second version.
Okay.
The flip top
Yeah.
kind. That's probably the most common one out in the wild. Because that was the one the original model was like $700, and then Gold Star made a model, and it was kind of junky because it's Gold Star. And then Panasonic made a revised model that was like half the price of the original, and that's the one that kind of sold a little bit. By then it had a decent catalog.
And it was just as capable, right?
Yeah, it was exact same thing. It's just you had to flip open the tray instead of the tray coming out.
Oh, man.
Just mild inconvenience.
Deal breaker, yeah.
Yeah. So it's it's a cool system. I guess at some point we will talk about the 3DO more.
Yeah, I would love to. But should we dive into actual news?
Yes, actual news. Game Boy emulator written in Go. I've done like a Hello World in Go, just because I was curious about it.
I'm a Go developer. I'm a gopher. This blows me away. Yeah, and so this is on GitHub, and if you scroll down and look at some of this, you could actually play this on the command line. So it's actually using, like, it pretty much turns your Linux shell, possibly DOS command prompt, into a Game Boy emulator. It almost looks like a dot matrix screen.
Yeah, if you wanted to, I guess,
If you
spin up a VM on the cloud hosting provider of your choice and play Game Boy games that way.
Or maybe you still work at air traffic control and you're still on like a TTY old terminal or whatever they still use there.
I'd rather those people did not play Game Boy games at work. There's a lot of jobs where I think playing a Game Boy at work is totally acceptable, like traffic cop.
Yeah.
Find the spot where you do the speed trap and then play Game Boy. I'm totally down with that idea.
Yeah.
Air traffic controller.
Probably not.
No Game Boy at the office.
But yeah, I thought I was a pretty good Go developer, and some of this code for me is like staring at the sun.
Yeah. For people who haven't seen Go, it's a I found it similar to C.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You'll probably tell me it's not, but in the one like Hello World I did, I'm like, oh, this is kind of like C. It's pretty easy to understand.
Yeah, for me, it's a perfect blend of like C and Python. Python only because it's much simpler than C or C++, which Python's known for.
Yeah, it's simple until you get like an error in production because of the type system that you would normally catch in a compiler. All right, not that people want to hear about this. Oh. VB6 was like my all-time favorite programming language, and you can get that problem there too because you can like not declare variables and then try and reference them, and it doesn't get caught till runtime because no compiler.
I stopped VB at VB3.
Oh, well, you missed out on a fun time.
Anyway.
All right, brief history of the Nintendo 64 in 1997. This is a very specific article.
From Game Tyrant. Pretty good site.
Game Tyrant.
So, yeah. This is a strange article.
Kind of. I mean, it's sort of doing like a chronological, history of the Nintendo 64 in '97 from like, it's weird because it starts off where it's like nothing happened much between January and March.
Yeah.
And it talks about that only a few sort of mediocre games came out, and then E3 there was a bunch of cool stuff, and then late summer there were a bunch of good releases, and then the Space World trailer, where you saw a bunch of stuff. Some of it was released, some of it wasn't. And then like a list of like, I don't know if this is every release, but it's at least like the major releases or the ones that they want to call out.
Wait, Star Fox 64 wasn't 97, was it? I mean,
well, remember, it hadn't been out, like, there weren't a lot of games for it in 96, right? 96 was, like, it launched, but there really weren't a lot of games.
You pretty much had Mario, yeah, and Wave Race.
Yeah, so Star Fox 64 was April in Japan and July in America. I picked it up, like, in 2001, and it came with a soundtrack CD that I might even still have. But I mean, there are a few really good releases in '97, but it is kind of a weird year because, I mean, I don't know. '98 is probably like the best year for the Super Nintendo, or the Nintendo 64, because obviously you have stuff like Ocarina of Time, and and then Majora's Mask in like 2000. Was it come out 2000 or 2001? 2000 it came out.
I like Ocarina better, actually.
Yeah, it sort of depends, right? Ocarina is a more traditional kind of story, and Majora's Mask is a very weird story. So if you don't like weird, you might not like Majora's Mask as much. I like Majora's Mask a lot. I mean, it was my favorite in the series up until Breath of the Wild.
But I mean, I was a Nintendo 64 guy. Over the PlayStation, I just thought it looked better. You had a SGI machine right at your TV. Now I know PlayStation had a lot better games, and some people think it had a better controller, but maybe it was because I got the N64 before PlayStation.
Yeah, I actually kind of bought them both around the same time, but it was like after their peak, like right around when Dreamcast was out when I bought them both, but PlayStation 2 was not out yet. And of the two, I've probably overall logged more time on the Nintendo 64, but again because of the Zelda games.
And you still use the controller to this day.
Yeah, I have the Nintendo 64 controller hooked up to my PC right now, and it's a great controller for emulation.
But yeah, so if you want to only read about N64 in 1997, Game Tyrant has the article for you.
Yeah, I like really weird specific stuff like that.
And speaking of N64 news, GoldenEye 007 N64 demo footage shows what could have been. So, where did this demo footage come from? This is on NintendoLife.com. We reference this site a lot. And honestly, I just talked about how I love the N64. I wasn't a big fan of GoldenEye. I had nothing against it. I just, I don't think I was very good at it, so I just didn't play it much. But this is a promotional VHS tape, I think.
No, it's looks like one of the developers. I don't know, maybe it was a promo tape, but it was leaked by one of the developers who said this was footage from a very early version of the game. I doubt this would have gotten sent to stores because it seems too early, but it's like GoldenEye's more of a on-rails shooter at that point.
Which is unthinkable. It would be a totally different game.
Well, yeah. I doubt it would have been the big hit that it was.
But yeah, a pretty cool video to watch. I really don't have much more to say about this one.
Yeah. This article I know made the rounds on the internet. I don't know if Nintendo Life was the first one who posted it or if they're reposting it. That's why Nintendo Life gets mentioned a lot, because they also do a lot of like reposts, like, hey, over on some other site, here's what they talked about. So it's good to follow them because they kind of summarize, major Nintendo related things from blogs that maybe normally aren't Nintendo focused. But this is about an old interview with Shigeru Miyamoto that is out on archive.org in scanned, newspaper or magazine form. It's from Electric Brain Magazine, 1992. I think I said newspaper because it's all black and white. It looks more like a newspaper than a magazine. And it talks a lot about like shifting from 8-bit Legend of Zelda to 16-bit and what they were able to do in the 16-bit version that they weren't able to do in the original. Kind of gets asked a little bit about how it's how it compares to Dragon Quest and Ys games. Kind of interesting to see Miyamoto's take on on the differences there, and then a little bit about his work style.
Yeah, and what's it called? A Link to the Past was almost called Ganon Strikes Back.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Until LucasArts sued them.
Yeah. But yeah, pretty cool. Definitely. I think anyone that listens to this podcast would enjoy reading this article.
Yeah. I would like to have a copy of that magazine.
Yeah.
Let's see, in ROM hacking news here, 28 years later, hacker fixes slowdown issues on Gradius III for Super Nintendo.
Yeah, and this isn't just in emulators. I mean, this is something you could burn to a ROM and play in a Nintendo, and it would actually play better. Or Super Nintendo, sorry. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yes.
So I watched this video, and I never really played Gradius 3, and it is a huge difference. I'll be referencing this in our Game Club game discussion, but yeah, it fascinates me what drives people to do this. Was it just a challenge? Were they a huge fan of this game and just wanted to fix it?
Yeah, probably. I mean, that's what would motivate me to do something like this. Like, I really enjoyed the game, but it's got this little annoying thing. Like, it would be hard for me to put this kind of effort into a game that I was not a big fan of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, let's do a ROM hack to make, like, Rastan on the NES more intelligible. You're like, yeah, I mean, it's a good idea, but...
Yeah, I have better things to do with my time, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean...
Did I say Rastan? I meant Rygar. You got to go back and check which game title I just said.
It was Rastan. You said.
I meant Rygar, of course. Was Rastan on the... I forgot to look.
There's gotta be.
I don't know.
I think that's on
There's
every system.
Rastan on the Sega Master System.
So yeah, the SA1 chip that this article references, I don't know much about that one.
No, this is a bit of Super Nintendo cartridge hardware I'm not familiar with.
Had I read this article more carefully before our podcast, I might know.
Yeah, I just went straight to the GitHub project. I saw this.
Nice.
That's the way my brain works. Like, I want to see what this thing is doing. And I didn't really understand it that well.
But if you want to test this out in an emulator, your emulator needs to support the SA1 chip. So, I guess the SNES 90X series does work.
Yeah, so it's everything except, I think they said Z SNES supports it.
Never used that one.
Yeah. So, SA1, it's a chip used in 34 NES games, including Mario RPG. So, it adds an extra processor core, and it runs independently of the main CPU.
Up to
and it
almost
uses
11
interrupts
megahertz.
Essentially. Yeah. Yeah, it uses some sort of interrupt system to its work. Yeah, it's a pretty powerful chip for its time.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
Built-in lockout, copy protect. Yeah, that's pretty. I think that's something I got to really read up on now. Is all I didn't realize there were so many like different add-on chips for Super Nintendo games.
Oh yeah, there absolutely are. That's another good episode idea.
Yeah, my brain just goes like, well, there's Super FX, and that's it.
Isn't this blast processing? Just kidding.
Yeah, it is exactly.
All right. Some SNK news. They released a transparent Neo Geo Mini with to support their upcoming Samurai Shodown release on the Switch and other platforms.
Yeah, I don't get the connection between transparent plastic and Samurai Shodown.
I think they were just looking for any excuse, and that was the next game coming out, maybe. There's some, on the box, there's some Sam Show art, and it looks like it comes with some trading cards, or a trading card, maybe. But there's blue, there's red, and there's just clear, which I guess would be white. Now, all this shows me is, now I could see inside and how there's nothing in it.
Yes, I know. Basically, we're looking at something smaller than a Raspberry Pi in there. Yeah, and they're only making 20,000 of each of these. I don't know how...
That seems like a big number for this.
It kind of does, yeah. Yeah.
I really like that blue, though. So, I did mention in an episode that I didn't know even one person that bought these. And then a week later, I was out to dinner with a buddy of mine, and he corrected me that he, in fact, bought one of these, and he said it's pretty cool. So he said, yeah, the games play great. Good selection. So, do you see any prices here?
No, I do not. There's a link to pre-order, but I wasn't going to pre-order, so I closed it. I'm nervous that I may instantly pre-order one.
15,000 yen. So what is that?
Wow, so that's some amount of money for sure.
$137. So that's not cheap.
Yeah, it's like I could buy that, or I could buy like 10 more of these miniature arcade cabinets on clearance at Target.
Yeah, or the SD card Neo Geo cart. But these are... The controllers are cool. They're kind of like the Neo Geo CD controllers. Ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, not bad. We really blasted through that news, didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, shall we dive into our topic of the episode?
Yeah. I think this episode we're going to talk a little bit. It's kind of a nerdy topic, but talk a little bit about importing Famicom games. I'll say as a disclaimer, like neither of us are hardcore Famicom importers, so these are going to kind of skew towards like more casual games. But it's a topic that I think kind of fits the show well, because if you're interested in different Nintendo emulators and different devices to play Nintendo games on, and patching and so on, there's quite a few like interesting Famicom games you can import and play in a system that supports IPS patches to get them in English, or just play them on a repro system or an original. I mean, I guess you can go through the effort of buying an original Famicom and hoping that it still works. But the games that you can play without having to know Japanese, either because there's English patches you can apply, or because it's just easy enough to figure out.
And I think that was the aspect of this show idea that I like the most, where I never thought about importing Famicom games much because I assumed I would either have to translate them, which now it's easy because I have Google Translate. I just take a picture of it and it translates it for me. But, that's a new solution that I have.
Yeah, no, I've imported quite a few Famicom games kind of for two reasons. Like, one is they're generally cheap. Now, here's what's interesting is, for a long time, one sort of hack to getting Nintendo games was getting the Famicom version would be a lot cheaper than buying the US version. So, like, a game like DuckTales, for example, that used to be like in 2009, that was probably a $30 game on eBay. But the Famicom version was $5. And there's really not that much Japanese required to play DuckTales. I know I picked up like DuckTales 1 and 2 on Game Boy that way because they were 1/5 the price in Japan that they were in for the US versions.
Yeah, and those are different enough from the NES version that it feels like a different game to me. Not in a bad way, just different game worth playing, you know?
Yeah. Now, the funny thing is, like, that there's so many systems that play these Famicom games now that it's kind of driven down the prices of some of the NES games. So, like, DuckTales on eBay is now a $5 game again.
As it probably should be.
and I always remember that being kind of expensive. And maybe it's also in, like, the Saturday, was it? After School Special Collection? What was it called?
Yeah.
After School Collection, Saturday Morning Collection, something like that.
It was like that and Gummy Bears and...
Well, it's Tailspin, Chippendale Rescue Rangers, by the way, is easily one of the best NES games. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, like for a long time, that was kind of like your hack. Like I can get the Japanese version, and it's gonna be way cheaper than the American version, and that's kind of not that's not the case so much anymore, which is weird. And then for me is like if there's a publisher you're a fan of, and you just kind of want to have all their games. I've imported a bunch of Famicom games for that reason. So like I've imported like all the Falcom Famicom games except for. I want to say like Dragon Slayer Jr. is a game they have. It's the title translates to roughly something like that. Because that for whatever reason still goes for a lot. It must not have been a very successful game, but stuff like, I mean, the East games were never released in America, but Legacy of the Wizard was released both in Japan and America, and for a long time was way cheaper in Japan than in the US. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So stuff like that, and the East games, if you want to import those, there's English patches for all of them. So you can download like the IPS file, put the cartridge into a system that supports IPS patching, and have a really, really good translation of the game.
So that was one that I didn't play in this list. How does it compare to the TurboGrafx version? Is it more like MSX or?
Yeah, not well. It's not a very good home version of it. It's neat to play because the maps are a little different.
Really?
Yeah, like whoever did, like East 2... In East 3, the maps are basically the same as every other home version. But the NES version, the maps are different. So I'm assuming whoever they had port that game took some liberties with it.
Interesting.
But the music's the same, except it's NES version. Really, in terms of 8-bit East games, like the Master System version, even though it's a little bit unforgiving at times in terms of difficulty, that's really like the best 8-bit version. Obviously, like the TurboGrafx or PSP version is really the one you want to get if you've never played it.
Yeah.
And the other kind of neat thing to import, although there's not much you can do with it, is the Dragon Quest games are something I just checked. Like more or less every Dragon Quest game on the Famicom is 99 cents to import. And I think part of that is that they all got US releases too. So no one has gone and done a fan translation of them yet.
Huh.
So you could buy them in anticipation of like, oh, maybe one day there'll be a patch for them in English. But yeah, no one's bothered translating any of those because they were translated. Whereas like the Falcom games or Final Fantasy 2 and 3 have English translation patches that you can apply.
Yeah, you can get great prices on those. Now, do you have a Famicom?
I have an adapter. I have an adapter cartridge.
I've always wanted that the Sharp version that has the built-in discs, floppy disk add-on.
Yeah. I don't have any FDS games, but I do have some games. I just bought like a $10 card converter. You need to have a top loader NES to use it, obviously. And again, like some of the Retron systems have a Famicom slot, others don't. And when I say Retron, I'm using it like Tupperware, like a generic term for Nintendo repro systems.
Yeah. And if you're gonna get one, that's one you it's probably best bang for your buck.
Yeah. So, in terms of like games that I think are worth importing and playing, like one thing is there's a lot of arcade games, including some that weren't released in America, like the NES ports of Choplifter and Dig Dug, for whatever reason, weren't released in the U.S.
Dig Dug was a strange one because, they had to convert it from vertical to horizontal. It is probably one of the best ports I've played, but it's just a little bit off.
Yeah.
Where
it is off. I agree. It's
if you've never played Dig Dug before, you wouldn't notice it was off.
Yeah.
That was
So if you've listened to all 10, I guess
it's actually 11.
So I guess we've done
I
guess we've done 10 episodes technically because we did have an episode 0. But anyhow, because of the development thing, you start indexes start at 0 always. So there's two things I'm obviously a fan of, like weird Falcom games and home ports of arcade games. I don't know why I'm obsessed with home ports of arcade games, but it's always been something I like to collect and play. So the other things that I've imported are like stuff like Pac-Man and Dig Dug and Choplifter for the Famicom, just to get those ports here. Now, I know Pac-Man was released in the U.S. I think it was released twice in the U.S. The Famicom port is, the exact same game. It's not the Tengen port, but the Namco port.
Yeah.
Kind of has cool art on the cartridge. That's about it, and it was really cheap.
Out of these games that you listed, which we'll go through, Splatterhouse was easily my favorite. I was floored by that game. I had no idea what to expect. It's kind of like a chibi Splatterhouse.
Yeah.
Like a cute 'em up Splatterhouse. And it's not forgiving, but it was really fun, really great. The controls felt great on it.
Yeah, now the downside of that one is it's one of the most expensive games to import. The two most expensive import games that, again, you don't need to know Japanese to play are like Splatterhouse and Holy Diver. Those are both... Splatterhouse is usually over $30, and Holy Diver seems to be like an $80 game. It seems to be like the most coveted among like NES collectors. It seems to be a very coveted game.
It's like the hip one right now.
Yeah. I'm assuming, like, I don't know why sometimes some games become, collector's items like that. I know this one was just like, it's regarded as like maybe the best Famicom game that wasn't released in the U.S. That's about all I can think of.
I didn't think it was. I mean, it was okay. It was, it was all right. Nothing against it. I just wouldn't pay $80 for it.
No, it feels sort of like a Castlevania ripoff.
Yeah.
And then there's a early Shigeru Miyamoto game you can import fairly cheap called Devil World.
I did not understand that one. I played it. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, it's like a lock and chase game. And lock and chase will be a game, a pick for me in the not too distant future, I think. It's like lock and chase, but the board moves. So it's like Tron Mazatron in that regard, because the board shifts, but you can sometimes get trapped and killed by the shifting board. And
you pick up I don't know if I crosses?
Can. I think it's a neat novelty game, and it's typically not expensive to buy. It's just not I didn't think it was a really great game. I feel like it's a collectible only game where it's like, I want to have this early Miyamoto game that most people have forgotten about.
And is it Bub and Bob from Bubble Bobble? Because it looks a lot like them.
Yeah, I don't think it is. But I could be wrong there, because I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, that's definitely one worth checking out if you could figure it out.
Yeah, because because Bub and Bob are like licensed characters, and this is a Nintendo game,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and this is, developed by Nintendo. So
it looks a lot like them, though.
Yeah, I don't know who ripped off who here, or if it's just if that's maybe now it could just be again because I'm not an expert on Japanese culture. Maybe that's just like a generic kind of style of dragon that gets drawn,
Mm-hmm.
like kids cartoon kind of thing. Like maybe they're both ripping off some cartoon that was on in 1972 that we don't know.
And Super Mario Brothers 2, I never really liked that one. It just felt like unforgiving, not in a fun way. Super Mario Brothers.
The Japanese Super Mario Brothers 2, right?
Yes, not.
Or I think it's called Lost Levels in the U.S.
Yeah.
And that's one you probably have that on a collection already.
Yeah, I do. But
And it's on the NES Remix games too.
it's just when they get that wind going in it, and I don't know.
Yeah, it always struck me as kind of a bad ROM hack.
Exactly, yeah. And I always wondered that if this came out as Super Mario Brothers 2 in the US, when it came out in Japan, would people like it more? Would
No.
Super Mario Brothers be less popular now? Yeah, so who knows? Because I love the American Super Mario Brothers 2.
No, because if you think about it, like the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, the setting of that game, like where the cartoon part, not the
wrestler
Captain
part.
Lou part
Yeah.
with Debbie Gibson or whoever shows up at the shop. The cartoon part is pretty much set in Super Mario Brothers 2 US.
Yep.
So if we didn't have that version of Super Mario Brothers 2, I don't know what Super Mario Super Show would look like. It might be Mario constantly getting killed by the wind.
Yeah. Or eating bad poison mushrooms or something.
Yeah.
I did not play Mahjong, not because for any reason other than I don't know how to play Mahjong.
Oh, you just match tiles that have the same shape.
Oh.
Same picture. So the one I like is, and I don't know what the exact, it's probably called Shanghai something. They almost always are. Was the one by Sunsoft. Is really good. And these are just relaxing games. I mean, you don't have to, there is a little bit of thinking involved because you can get yourself into an unwinnable game state if you do things wrong in it, but overall just a relaxing, tile match puzzle game.
I think I just have a bad taste in my mouth about Mahjong because, back in the day when you would find multi-cart games, and a lot of them would be, 10 Mahjong filler games that, as a kid you weren't that excited to find.
I thought maybe you were in a bad production of Laundry and Bourbon or something. Sorry, nobody got that joke. I'm sorry. Well, the one person who did thought it was funny. Yeah, so that's those are kind of my recommendations. I got to look at what games I have. So I'm looking back at my shelf of games, and I have a bunch of Famicom games. I probably should have grabbed them beforehand.
Kid Dracula, that was pretty cool. I never heard of that game before this.
Yeah, I haven't played that. Now, what I didn't look into yet were prices on some of these like graphic novel games. Like, there's a lot of graphic novel games that came out in Japan, and many of them, like Ghost Hunter, is the American title. Surigari, I guess, is the Japanese title. I didn't look to see what that goes for, but that's another one where if you want to get the original cart and then, apply the patch, I guess that one's all right too. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what that loose game goes for. So many visual novel games. I mean, that's a weird one here. Like, yeah, Surigari's pretty cheap. It's under $10. What
about sports games?
Yeah. So much like America, sports games are dirt cheap. If this is something you're interested in. If you want to wallpaper your house in like soccer and baseball games, it's really easy to get just huge lots of Famicom games.
But yeah, any closing thoughts on this topic?
No, I mean, I think it's for me, like, again, I'm not a Famicom cart collector, but I'm more of like a collector of specific types of games.
Yeah.
And if you are, then, the Famicom has got a few really good gems, and some of them, you can play. I mean, most of them, I haven't run into too many games that were like completely unplayable outside of like graphic novel stuff.
Yeah, it's not like you're going to be able to play Sherlock Holmes Detective, where it's all reading. I mean...
Yeah. Yeah. Now, there is a Sherlock Holmes Famicom game, but it is a platformer.
Huh, that's strange.
I think I played 1 minute of it and said, oh, that's not what I wanted. I know one of the Famicom games I bought was the Ultima games, and I have to go through and see if there's a patch for those. Those were also really cheap, because again, RPGs are really cheap until they get a translation, then they go up in price a lot. Maybe the exception to that so far is like Final Fantasy 2 and 3. There's so many copies out there that you can still get that really cheap.
And then once hipsters decide it was the coolest game they never played when they were a teenager, then it goes up in price too.
It goes up, yeah. Yeah, the nice thing is Final Fantasy 2 and 3 are like on Android in iPhone, so you don't have to do anything special to play them.
But cool. Yeah, should we dive into some Game Club discussion?
Yeah. Why don't you go first?
Cool. So I picked Imperium, and as I stated last episode, I was just scrolling through Launchbox, and the music started playing, and I thought it was kind of catchy. I clicked on it, and I was treated to this, I won't call it a bullet hell, but it's a top-down shooter. You're a robot, spaceship, plane kind of thing. It reminded me of some of the later bullet hell games that you have a lot going on underneath your character, because they had enough processing power to do that stuff in the background. They kind of dip their toe in that with this. You start out with kind of a, I wouldn't call it a pea shooter, but a little bit better than that. Then you get a wider weapon, then a laser. You could switch between them. You have some bombs, and you also have a weird speed button. I wasn't very good at this. I didn't get very far, but I really liked playing it. It's developed by Vic Tokai. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I didn't really know any of their games other than they did the port of Bump and Jump, one of my literally all-time top 5 favorite games ever, surprisingly, Bump and Jump, for NES. And I was surprised by that, because that is a fantastic port. Yeah, Vic Tokai, I didn't really recognize much else from them. This is only on the SNES. I didn't see any other ports for it. But I had a lot of fun with this one. It was kind of an easy to dive into top-down shooter, and I actually used it to test my Vita when I put RetroArch on it this weekend, and it slowed down to a snail pace on SNES 2010, but played perfectly on 2005. So yeah, did you dive into this one at all? I know you thought you had funny memories of it from working in a store.
Yeah, I did. That's about it. I don't have a copy of this game. And by the way, I think Vic Tokai was the publisher of the game.
Oh.
And the developer was a company called Shodown. I don't know if I pronounced that right. They have a really eclectic catalog of games they've developed. But it looked like around this time in the 90s, they were doing quite a few shooters. Because they also did... what else they do here? Well, that's not really a shooter, I guess. But they did a couple other like shooters and action and fighter games. A lot of like something fighter games. They did some racing games. So their catalog is really mixed. I'll just say that. Like they seem to kind of dabble in a number of different games, including Pets, Hamster's Life Part 2.
Hamster Club.
Yeah. Well, hey, why not? So yeah, this was a game. It's funny. I decided to go search this thing on eBay. This is a very rare game and is apparently super expensive now. But yeah, this was a game that I think flopped commercially because I remember selling this game for either $1 or $5 new. Like we just were told clear this game out. Nobody wants it, kind of deal. It was one day we got like this, and there was a baseball game. It was a box that was like this and a baseball game, and now I don't remember what that baseball game was, although I'm beginning to wonder if it was also something distributed or published by Vic Tokai. I don't know. I always sort of associate them with Golgo 13. That was an NES game that I remember looked really cool in catalogs, but that was maybe not as cool as it looked, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those games that I think, has really good cutscenes that when you put them in Nintendo Power Magazine, it looks awesome. But the gameplay itself maybe, isn't the best. So yeah, we were clearing these things out, and now it's like a $200 game.
So you wish you bought 10 of them back in the day.
Yeah, I should have just bought that box. I mean, if I could go back in time, I would definitely... There's a lot of games I would definitely hoard, and then, live off, live in Key West or something, just eBaying these things.
Yeah.
Maybe not Key West, it's a little too hot, but somewhere less hot than Key West that's hard to reach.
Yeah, not much more to say about that one. It's pretty simple, straightforward game, other than, kind of some goofy controls. With the bosses, it was hard to tell if I was hurting them. Like, at first I would hurt them, and then I would be shooting them, and nothing would be happening. Eventually I would get past them, but I don't know how or why. That could have been just me being dense. I don't know.
Perhaps. What was that baseball game we cleared out? This is going to bug me for a long time. It was not Extra Innings. Oh, Super Baseball Simulator 1.0, perhaps?
I don't know that one.
Could have been. That was like a Culture Brain game. And Culture Brain stuff was always of questionable quality.
So what was your game here?
Oh, yeah. So, what was my game? Oh, yeah. PacLand. So, this was another one. It was on my mind from binge watching Starcade, I guess. Not saying PacLand. It's there's sort of this weird, mental wormhole I went down from watching Starcade, but it led me back to, trying PacLand again. Mm-hmm. And PacLand was a new take on the Pac-Man series. I think it was sort of their attempt to diversify the Pac-Man brand a little bit and make a sort of platforming game based on the Pac-Man franchise. This is a game that I for whatever reason, held a lot of nostalgia for. I always thought it was a really cool Pac-Man game. Imagine that, Pac-Man's on a side-scrolling adventure.
He has legs and
his legs, yeah, and a hat with a fairy under the hat that he has to let out for air. And playing it again, I realized this was not a good game. This did lead me to the topic, though, about importing Famicom games. So this was a game that was released on the Famicom, but was not ported to the American NES. So if you want to play an 8-bit version of it, you've got to import the Famicom version. And in the 16-bit world, there's a TurboGrafx 16 version that I own a card of. Of the two, the TurboGrafx version is better, of course. It looks better, controls better, kind of feels close to the arcade, whereas the Famicom version, because of the lack of color depth, it's sort of hard for you to tell what you can jump on and what you can't sometimes. What's background and what's foreground is really hard on there. But here I played the game. There's no joystick. There's buttons to move Pac-Man left or right, and then another button to jump.
Or on your NES controller, up to jump, right?
Yes. So the one thing, if I was porting PacLand for Namco, I would have said, hey, I know you guys came up with this awful control scheme that you think is good, but we're going to have people use the D-pad to go left and right and the button to jump.
Because that's how brains and hands work.
That's how it works, right? So I would have to say PacLand overall did not age well. I think it's still graphically kind of a neat game. Pac-Man's running through a city, and then he's in the mountains and the forest, and the fairy kingdom, for lack of a better term, right? Mm-hmm. It all looks really nice, and honestly, Pac-Man looks kind of cool. I mean, it sort of looks like the cartoon rendition of Pac-Man, and he's got his little Robin Hood hat. It's still visually kind of a neat game. It's just not much fun to play again.
Yeah, I started out with the arcade version on MAME, and I forgot about the control set. So I spent 15 minutes thinking my buttons were mapped wrong until I looked on MAME, and you could look at the controls, and there is no joystick. So I sorted that out, and then I went to the TurboGrafx version, and that was a bit easier. It's a fun game.
So you enjoyed this more than I did, it sounds like.
Yeah, I liked it. It's not easy. It's it's not as good as Mario because it has the weird controls, but I spent some time with it. It's one of those games where it's a lot of memorization, more so than a lot of other platformers. It definitely is a spiritual predecessor to, I don't know if you've ever played these, or if our listener has, Pac-Man's Ghostly Adventures. I know the second one's on the 3DS. I don't know what the first one is on, but it's like they brought this game into the 3D world in a very good way. I actually really like those games, so if you haven't played those, I recommend them. And I would recommend this too if you haven't played it, just to, at the very least, get the history, because this was, doing something a little bit different with Pac-Man.
Yeah. Now, it, like a lot of the Pac-Man games at the time, the arcade cabinet is really nice looking. If that's something you're interested in collecting, I think it's a nice looking cabinet still. I just, I couldn't get back into it. Tried and just was not able to enjoy the game that much.
But you had fond memories of it as a kid. Or
Yeah,
at least
I had
as
memories
younger.
of it being like this really cool game, and then I think that's true with a lot of things. You go back and you try a game that looked so impressive for its time, and you realize, oh, this isn't really that great. Like, you know what? Return of the Jedi for the arcade really wasn't that good.
Yeah, that's how I feel about most Atari console games, even 7800. I had fond memory of all these 2600 carts I have, and then I try one out and I just think oh, I like this because I really didn't have anything else.
Yeah, I have a little bit different experience where there are games that I remember fondly from the 2600 era that of course I don't like, and then stuff that I remember not liking back in the day that now, for whatever reason, I think is a lot of fun.
Maybe you were younger, not sophisticated enough to get it back then.
Yeah, it could be stuff like Shark, right? That's actually a Intellivision game. When I was young, I'm like, oh, well, this is some silly kids game. I don't want anything to do with that. And now it's a game that I think is a lot of fun.
Strawberry Shortcake.
Not there yet. But yeah, so PacLand, you might like it. I was kind of like, oh yeah, not as good as I remember.
And we have had a lot of listener feedback about Game Club this week.
Yes.
In advance, I would like to thank you all for writing us. I really do this podcast so I have an excuse to talk to, well, at least one person about stuff I really like to talk about. And really, you guys writing in, I really appreciate it because it's it extends the conversation so much more. But Rick writes in that he really was grabbed by our MAME talk last week. We talked about kind of getting MAME into an arcade cabinet. And he built his own years ago, and he disliked the clutter of having every kind of control set on one control panel. So the trackball and 6 buttons and 2 joysticks and all that. So his solution was to create kind of a hot swappable control panel setup. And he highly recommends doing it if you like woodworking, which Hugh, I know you love.
Yeah, nothing I enjoy more.
And I think he gave us some pics, and it looks really cool. It looks kind of like it's not a cabaret what he built, but kind of the because it's wood tone and wood grain, and kind of gave me that feel. But yeah, that's really cool. I love that you did that. It looked like a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, and speaking of Shark, he also hosts a podcast called the Intellivisionaries, and I think they just did Shark.
Oh, cool. Oh, Rick, I'll check out your podcast.
Yeah, they I don't know if they do this on every episode, but the original concept of the show was sort of like we're going to talk about. They have people who are like some more Intellivision fans. This one's all Intellivision fans, so it's mostly like Intellivision stuff, and they occasionally get onto other systems in news, but it's mostly focused on Intellivision games. But they cover a lot of I know like almost everything on Intellivision is obscure, but they do a lot of obscure by Intellivision standard games.
Very cool. I'm excited to check that out.
Let's see. Grand Emperor sends us an email. Says he saw me at Midwest Gaming Classic, but didn't want to interrupt my game. Well, everything's on free play. You can interrupt me. I'm not out any money. It's free play. Wants to know if we think the Friday night events are the preview night. Like the preview. What's the word I'm looking for?
Expensive.
Pro Gamer VIP. The more expensive night was worth it. I've never attended any of them, but I can't make it. Clearly, if I haven't attended them, you know my opinion on whether I think it's worth the price tag. But it's all just, personal opinion. Like, for me, if I knew some people there, like I had some old friends or something, might be worth it. Although it's more likely, we're in Milwaukee. We'd end up going to, the Safe House or something else instead. All right. This is the problem with me in emails. I don't actually, read very well. So he's listening to our latest show about MAME cabinets, and he's working on one as a project right now. He says he's got a X-Arcade CRT cabinet, minus the PC and tank controls. He used to have a laptop in there, but that didn't really work out very well. So he's recently moved it and is working on a RetroPie setup for it. And is running into issues getting Raspberry Pi connected to VGA, which doesn't sound like fun.
No, but when you get that done, or if you end up getting too frustrated, you just burn it. Send us pictures either way.
Yes, and he is interested if there's any other listeners that have done RetroPie to VGA adapters. And if you have, you can email us, and I'll see if, I don't mind. Yeah, I'll share your email addresses, if you guys want to talk about it. Or post it on, I think we have a Facebook page. And thank you to
good call.
People that post there. You can post on there too. I guess that's a more modern way of collaborating between people, right? Is Facebook?
Yeah. And thank you for that email. And Eric writes, he's glad to see Hughes back at podcasting. He is a listener of your old podcast and very active on the forums talking about survival horror games, and and wonders when we're going to...
Speaking of just, he should check out Full Quiet on the NES. It's not, I wouldn't say it's not classified as a survival horror game, but it has the sort of aesthetics and feel of one.
Maybe we'll do that on a Halloween game episode, maybe.
Yeah.
But he recommends we go to Portland and check out that retro gaming convention, which I've seen videos of, and would love to go to that. He hears Midwest Gaming Classic's pretty cool, but he says the Seattle Retro Gaming Expo is the preferred one, even over Portland, which that one I will go to. Absolutely want to go to that. Some questions. Have we tried modding Wii's at all? What do you think about homebrew on them? They have a DOS emulator, and he's had mixed luck with homebrews and emulators on it, and soft modding is pretty fast to get the Wii or GC games going. It could be a nightmare, though. I have modded my Wii, and I was just about to dive into it because there was so many... See, there's one thing I should say, and I'll probably say this every 10 episodes, is I have a lot of ROMs. I have a lot of ISOs. But if I find a game that I like, that I actually want to play through, if I don't already own it, I will buy it if there's a way to buy it, whether it's on Steam or, PS4, Switch, something. So Please don't think I'm just like some pirate. But anyway, I was just about to dive into the Wii. I forgot to turn off Wi-Fi, and it updated itself and bricked itself. So then I had to go buy another motherboard because I had a really nice case for it, and I just didn't want to get another Wii, and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
I haven't touched it since.
So yeah, I have a Wii that has a dead CD drive. So I guess it would make sense for me to mod that one.
Yeah, there's some great SD card upgrades.
And it's blank, like that system's dead because once the drive died, I did the whole like transfer your data from the Wii to the Wii U. And Nintendo doesn't like you to have 2 copies of anything, so.
No. Which is a nightmare with 3DS also. But he said he needs to finish working on his RetroPie and tinker with Dreamcast Replay, Dreamcade Replay, which I don't know if... Is that the Dreamcast? What is that? I don't know what that is.
It's an emulation box.
Oh, okay. Although I hear the front-end emulation are pretty poor. The RetroCade is another device he could sort of recommend, very easy to add additional games to, but the system could get bogged down. And he wants us to keep up the mid-90s PC gaming, which I plan on after I get my retro box set up with just an easier way for me to import them rather than just manually installing them on a DOSBox. Mm-hmm. So I do have a few on Steam I want to get into, but yeah, Hugh, I think I'm going to wait for you to do a 90s DOS game before I do the next one.
Yeah, I'm not doing one next episode, but
No.
I definitely have some queued up. Although I tend to be more like early 90s. Maybe. I don't know, Windows 95. There's a lot, I guess there's a lot of Windows 95 games I have on my spreadsheet of games to talk about. Major sense of feedback, both on like a topic and some other things we mentioned. Sega hardware based on Saturn was called the ST-V or Titan. Mm-hmm. And it uses cartridges internally that look sort of like Super Nintendo carts. And then...
I got it mixed up with the GNet PCM.
GNet,
yeah. PC card stuff.
Which was made by Taito.
Yep.
He says, yeah. Yep. And FreeDOS hasn't used DOS in ages, but remembers buying DR DOS from Electronics Boutique as an alternative to MS, and he was that person. We sold like 1 copy at the store I worked at. Everybody knew DR DOS was not going to last, unfortunately. I'm sure it was a great version of DOS. But he mentions that it had really much better performance than MS-DOS, which is probably true, but none of that matters. For our last games, Space Quest 4, he did play a little bit of Space Quest 3 and Heroes Quest, because he had a friend from high school that would, I guess, use his mom's office computer on the weekend. That's a cool story. You break into your parents' office on the weekend and play these games. He says off 5.25-inch disc. And let's see, Eternal Champions. Not a big fan. He was not a fan of that one. So he has the Sega CD release. He thinks it's too difficult to perform the moves, and the AI is tough. Those are both valid criticisms. I think it's much more fun as a player versus player game than a human versus computer game. And he thinks he bought it when it was being cleared out for like $10, which is probably true. It's one of those games that obviously you could get on clearance. Yeah. It would be really great to like time travel back to 1995 just to go game shopping, just to hit the Sega CD and 32X clearance sections.
And Turbo Duo.
And Turbo Duo, of course, yeah. Yeah. And he says, enjoying the new show and listens to it on Mondays while cooking dinner.
Yeah, it's his alone time, which none of us get enough of, so we appreciate it. Jess writes us, after hearing Rob's, my description of Imperium, he was intrigued and checked it out. And he recognized the name of I thought it was the developer, but the publisher, Vic Tokai. And he thought it was the people that did Zero Wing, but it was not. It was Go 13, like you just mentioned. And how do you pronounce that? Moffat Conspiracy?
Yeah, Moffat Conspiracy, which
I don't know that one.
Well, I know it, but I haven't played it, so I can't really comment on it. Go 13, I have played.
He said the visuals are great on this. Didn't really notice the music, which probably meant it was pretty okay because there's a lot going on the screen. It wasn't annoying, you know. He doesn't really play shmups much, but you know, it kind of felt like Galaga or Gradius, and yeah, he made it, you know, a normal difficulty, about 75 ways of the first level. He liked the second and third weapons, me too, the wave and the laser, but not the fourth one, the random direction star, which I didn't really use that one. Mm-hmm. And I think he made up that name because it's in quotes, random direction star. And he also got the grade 2 version, like the upgraded version of the weapons. And eventually got used to using the bombs, which I never did, and never got used to the speed button, which I didn't discover until probably my 4th playthrough. Or not playthrough, I didn't finish it. But yeah, he did have a lot of frustration with those. It's definitely a hard arcade game or Nintendo game. He wanted to know how far I had left to go in the first level, and after searching the internet briefly, I was reminded why I had to play a normal. After switching to easy, he got past level 1 finally. He's been meaning to email us about our game last week, Captain America and the Avengers game, which he played a few times in the arcade. He wasn't really into superhero comics, and he played Vision, which I think that's who you played, right? Mm-hmm. And because he had the coolest powers.
I don't know the names of any of the Avengers.
But he looks like his name would be Vision, right? And
yeah.
And he doesn't remember much else about it. It was kind of a second-rate game compared to the X-Men game, which I would agree to. His arcade had the 6-player X-Men game, which, yeah, I would play that all the time. And he likes our format that we have, kind of the game club format. Like, we're all in this together, you know, talking about these games we love or don't love, but we love talking about them. So, yeah, Chess, thank you so much for that email, and I think I agree with absolutely everything you said about all those games.
Yeah, it's a good lead-in for us to mention what games we're going to talk about next time. So, email address is email@retrogameclub.net. Again, email@retrogameclub.net. One big word.
And don't let our reading skills discourage you from writing us. I've actually written Majors twice because I butchered his emails. It's just, we record this kind of late. I have a kid that never sleeps and a crazy day job, and you have a family and work, and
I've never been good at reading out loud. I mean, like, even in school, that was like instant trauma for me whenever I had to read aloud in class. I don't know why.
So what's your game for Game Club now?
Because I'm still feeling obsessed with arcade to home ports, and I haven't gotten burned out on them yet, I'm going to go with Virtua Racing.
I'll be interested to... So are you going to play the arcade? Like, are you going to play the main version?
Maybe. I'm probably going to play the 32X version mostly.
Okay.
I was thinking about it because there was like a trailer for the Switch remake of Virtua Racing, right? And that got me thinking about playing the game some more. And,
I didn't know that was happening.
Yeah, it's a really cool trailer. It does side by side of like their version versus all the other ones they've made over the years. So, yeah, I can give that a try. I'm definitely gonna find. I have 32X physical, cart version because everybody that has a 32X has Virtua Racing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's impossible to own a 32X without having Virtua Racing. So I think I will. I'll probably mostly play that version, but play any version. I have the Genesis version. I always think it's funny whenever I find it at a yard sale, because I bought the Genesis version of Virtua Racing for either $1 or $2 on 2 different occasions. And this was a game that was like $84.99 or $79.99 when it came out originally.
Wow, I did not know that. Huh.
Yeah, it was crazy expensive. It has an extra chip, and you might not be able to play it on. I have to, don't quote me on this, but like it might not play on every model of the Genesis that's out there because of this expansion chip it has. I got to go look at. Don't quote me on that. I got to go check the history on that again.
Well, speaking of expensive games, my game of the week is The Last Blade. It's a Neo Geo title you could get on Steam, PS4 and 2, I think. Neo Geo CD, and Color Pocket, which I don't recommend. I never recommend. I don't know why people love that system so much, but that's a different episode. So The Last Blade for me, and Virtua Racing for you.
That's a tough one because it's not on a lot of the arcade collections. I don't believe it's on the SNK collection for PlayStation 2. I think it's on a different collection. It's on... I gotta look this up now, but I'm pretty sure it's even hard to get on like older... obviously you can buy it on Steam and newer systems and all that.
See, I didn't even know if... I thought it was just a standalone on PlayStation 2. Oh, it's on PlayStation also. PlayStation 1.
Oh, so you're saying it's a standalone. Oh, because the year is released. I see. Here I was thinking this was... I thought it was a couple years older than it is. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, it's like 97 to 99 kind of coming up. But yeah, we will talk about that in a week or two.
Yeah, sounds good. I guess that's it. So thanks for listening.
Bye, everyone.